Mike Rodriguez had always been proud of his suburban home in Willowbrook Gardens. The quiet neighborhood with its manicured lawns and friendly HOA rules seemed like the perfect place to raise his family. He worked hard as an electrical engineer to afford the monthly mortgage and the rising electricity bills that came with powering his modest three-bedroom house. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning in March, when Mike noticed something odd about his electric bill. The previous month's usage had jumped by nearly 40%, despite the family being more conscious about energy consumption during the winter months. His wife Sarah had been nagging everyone to turn off lights, and they had even replaced most bulbs with LED fixtures. The spike made no sense. Mike stared at the bill over his morning coffee, running calculations in his head. As an electrical engineer, he understood power consumption better than most homeowners. Their usage patterns hadn't changed significantly, yet the meter reading suggested they were consuming electricity like they were running a small business from their garage. Sarah walked into the kitchen already dressed for her job at the local bank. "The electric company must have made a mistake," Sarah said, glancing at the bill. "Should I call them today?" Mike shook his head, folding the paper carefully. "Let me check a few things first. Maybe there's an issue with our system somewhere." That weekend, Mike decided to investigate. He grabbed his multimeter and began testing various circuits throughout the house. Everything appeared normal. The HVAC system was running efficiently, their water heater wasn't drawing excessive power, and none of their appliances showed signs of malfunction. The mystery deepened when he checked the main electrical panel in the garage. Standing in his driveway, Mike studied the power lines running to his house. That's when he noticed something unusual. His neighbor Linda Chen had recently purchased a bright red Tesla Model S, and she had been parking it in her driveway every evening connected to a charging cable. The timing seemed suspicious, but Mike pushed the thought away. Surely no one would be bold enough to steal electricity from a neighbor. Linda Chen had moved in about 8 months ago after her divorce. She worked as a real estate agent and always dressed impeccably, driving her luxury car like it was a statement piece. The HOA had welcomed her enthusiastically, especially since her previous house had sold for well above market value, raising property values in their small community. She attended every HOA meeting, volunteered for the newsletter committee, and hosted elegant dinner parties that made other neighbors slightly jealous. Mike had always maintained a polite but distant relationship with Linda. She was friendly enough, always waving when she saw him working in the yard, but something about her seemed calculated. Sarah often commented that Linda's lifestyle seemed expensive for someone who claimed to be struggling financially after her divorce. The Tesla, the designer clothes, the frequent home improvements, it all added up to more than what most people could afford on a real estate agent's commission. Over the next few days, Mike found himself paying more attention to Linda's evening routine. She would arrive home around 6, pull into her driveway, and immediately connect her Tesla to a charging cable that disappeared around the side of her house. The cable setup looked professional, almost like it had been installed by an electrician. Mike began to wonder where exactly that cable led. On Thursday evening, Mike decided to take a casual walk around the block. It was something he did occasionally for exercise, so it wouldn't seem suspicious. As he strolled past Linda's property, he tried to follow the path of the charging cable with his eyes. The white cord ran along the side of her house, through some decorative bushes, and seemed to continue toward the back fence line. Mike's heart began racing as he realized what he was seeing. The cable appeared to snake along the fence line that separated their properties. His electrical engineer mind immediately began calculating possibilities. If someone had access to his outdoor electrical outlets, or worse, if they had somehow tapped directly into his electrical service, they could easily steal power without him knowing. That night, Mike couldn't sleep. He lay in bed running scenarios through his head. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. Linda's Tesla charging schedule coincided perfectly with his elevated electricity bills. Her charging cable disappeared in the direction of his property. And most telling, she had never mentioned having any electrical work done to install a proper charging station, which would be required for a Tesla in most HOA communities. Sarah noticed his restlessness. "What's bothering you?" "You've been tossing and turning for an hour." Mike sat up in bed. "I think Linda might be stealing our electricity to charge her Tesla." Sarah propped herself up on her elbow. "That's a serious accusation, Mike. Are you sure?" Mike explained his observations about the timing, the cable route, and the suspicious jump in their electric bill. Sarah listened carefully, her banker's mind processing the financial implications. If she's been doing this for months, she could have stolen hundreds of dollars worth of electricity, Sarah calculated. But how would she even access our power? Mike had been wondering the same thing. As an electrical engineer, he knew there were several ways someone could tap into a neighbor's electrical service, especially if they had some basic knowledge of electrical systems. Linda could have accessed an outdoor outlet, spliced into their service line, or even convinced a corrupt electrician to help her make an illegal connection. The next morning, Mike called in sick to work. He needed to conduct a thorough investigation of his property to find evidence of the theft. Armed with his professional electrical testing equipment, he began a systematic search of his entire electrical system, starting with the outdoor outlets and working his way toward the property line where Linda's charging cable seemed to disappear. What Mike discovered would change everything between him and his HOA neighbor forever. Mike's investigation began at dawn. He started by checking every outdoor electrical outlet on his property, testing each one with his multimeter for any signs of unauthorized usage. The outlets on the front and sides of his house showed normal readings, but when he reached the back corner of his property near the fence line with Linda's yard, his equipment detected something alarming. Hidden behind a large decorative bush that grew along the fence, Mike discovered a heavy-duty extension cord plugged into his outdoor outlet. The cord had been painted to match the color of his house's siding, making it nearly invisible unless someone was specifically looking for it. The cord snaked through a small gap in the fence boards and disappeared into Linda's yard. Mike's hands trembled as he traced the cord's path. His neighbor had been systematically stealing his electricity for months, probably since the day she bought her Tesla. The outlet she had chosen was one he rarely used, located behind landscaping where it wouldn't be easily noticed during routine yard work. It was a calculated and deliberate theft that had cost his family hundreds of dollars. Pulling out his phone, Mike took dozens of photos from every angle. He documented the painted cord, the gap in the fence, and the connection to his outlet. As an engineer, he understood the importance of evidence, especially when dealing with what was essentially a crime. The photos showed clear proof that Linda had physically connected her Tesla charging system to his electrical service without permission. Mike followed the cord through the fence gap and peered into Linda's yard. The extension cord connected to a professional-grade Tesla charging station that had been installed against the side of her garage. The installation looked expensive and legitimate, except for the fact that it was being powered by stolen electricity from his property. Linda had essentially built her entire Tesla charging setup around the theft of his power. The financial implications hit Mike like a punch to the stomach. Tesla vehicles require significant electricity to charge, especially the high-performance models like Linda's Model S. A full charge could easily cost $15 to $20 worth of electricity, and if Linda was charging her car every night, she had stolen potentially thousands of dollars over the past several months. Mike carefully documented everything, taking photos of the charging station, the connection points, and the route the cord took through his property. He even measured the distance and noted the specific outlet that had been compromised. This wasn't a simple case of borrowing power in an emergency. This was a premeditated theft that had been carefully planned and executed. Back in his house, Mike researched the legal implications of electricity theft. What he discovered made him even angrier. In most states, stealing electricity was considered a felony, especially when the amount exceeded a certain dollar threshold. Linda hadn't just violated HOA rules or neighborly trust. She had potentially committed a serious crime that could result in criminal charges and significant fines. Sarah returned home from work that afternoon to find Mike sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by photos, legal documents, and calculator printouts. His face was grim as he explained what he had discovered. "She's been stealing from us for at least 4 months, Mike said, showing Sarah the photos. Based on Tesla charging requirements and our electricity rate, she's probably stolen about $800 worth of power." Sarah examined the photos carefully. As someone who dealt with financial crimes at the bank, she recognized the seriousness of the situation. "This is theft, Mike, real theft. She could go to jail for this." Mike nodded grimly. "The question is, what do we do about it?" They discussed their options. They could confront Linda directly, but that might give her an opportunity to remove the evidence and deny everything. They could report the theft to the police immediately, but that would escalate the situation dramatically and, potentially, destroy any chance of resolving things peacefully within the community. Sarah suggested they document everything thoroughly and then approach Linda with the evidence, giving her a chance to make things right before involving law enforcement. Mike wasn't sure Linda deserved that consideration, but he agreed it was the most reasonable first step. That evening, Mike positioned himself at his bedroom window with a pair of binoculars. He wanted to catch Linda in the act of using his stolen electricity. Around 7:30, Linda's red Tesla pulled into her driveway. Mike watched as she got out of the car, walked to the charging station, and plugged in her vehicle. Through his binoculars, Mike could see the charging indicator light up on Linda's Tesla. At the same moment, he noticed a slight dimming of his own house lights, confirming that Linda was indeed drawing power from his electrical system. The theft was happening in real time right before his eyes. Mike called Sarah to the window. "Watch this," he said, handing her the binoculars. Sarah observed Linda's evening charging routine, while Mike monitored his house's electrical usage on a real-time meter he had connected to their main panel. Every time Linda's Tesla drew power, it showed up as increased consumption on Mike's electrical system. The evidence was undeniable and scientifically measurable. Over the next 3 days, Mike continued documenting Linda's theft. He recorded the times she plugged in her car, photographed the charging station in operation, and calculated the exact amount of electricity being stolen each night. The pattern was consistent. Linda would arrive home between 7 and 8 p.m., plug in her Tesla, and draw approximately 40 to 60 kilowatt hours of electricity from Mike's service throughout the night. Mike also discovered that Linda had been particularly clever about hiding her theft. She had painted not only the extension cord but also the fence gap and connection points to make them blend seamlessly with the existing landscape. She had clearly put significant thought and effort into concealing her crime. The more Mike learned about the scope of Linda's theft, the angrier he became. This wasn't a desperate person stealing electricity to keep their lights on. This was someone with significant disposable income stealing luxury car charging power from a hard-working family. Linda drove an expensive Tesla, wore designer clothes, and hosted elaborate parties, all while secretly stealing hundreds of dollars worth of electricity from her neighbors. Sarah suggested they check with other neighbors to see if Linda had victimized anyone else. Mike agreed, and they began casually asking neighbors about any unusual increases in their electricity bills. What they discovered would make Linda's theft even more shocking. Mike's investigation into Linda's electricity theft took on new urgency when he discovered he wasn't her only victim. During casual conversations with neighbors over the weekend, Mike learned that Tom and Janet Williams, who lived on the other side of Linda's property, had also experienced unexplained spikes in their electricity bills over the past several months. Tom Williams mentioned the issue while they were both checking their mail on Saturday morning. "It's the strangest thing," Tom said, shaking his head. "Our electric bill has been almost double what it normally is, but we haven't changed anything about how we use power. Janet thinks maybe our heat pump is failing." Mike's heart raced as he realized Linda had been even more brazen than he initially thought. She wasn't just stealing from one neighbor. She was systematically stealing from multiple households to power her expensive lifestyle. The scope of her theft was expanding beyond anything Mike had imagined. That afternoon, Mike walked over to the Williams house with his multimeter and offered to help Tom troubleshoot his electrical system. Tom gratefully accepted, assuming Mike was just being a helpful neighbor with technical expertise. What Mike discovered confirmed his worst suspicions about Linda's criminal operation. Hidden behind Tom's garage, in an area obscured by overgrown shrubs, Mike found another painted extension cord plugged into an outdoor outlet. This cord also snaked toward the fence line with Linda's property, disappearing through a carefully concealed gap in the wooden boards. Linda had been stealing electricity from both neighboring houses simultaneously, doubling her theft and the financial damage to her victims. Mike took photos of Tom's compromised outlet and the hidden cord, building an even stronger case against Linda. He then had to make a difficult decision about whether to tell Tom immediately about the theft or gather more evidence first. Mike chose to continue investigating, knowing that once he revealed Linda's crimes, everything would change rapidly. Over the next few days, Mike discovered the full extent of Linda's elaborate theft scheme. She had installed a sophisticated electrical distribution system in her backyard that allowed her to draw power from multiple sources. The stolen electricity from both properties fed into a central junction box hidden behind her garage, which then supplied power to her Tesla charging station and several other high-consumption devices. Mike realized that Linda was not only charging her Tesla with stolen electricity but also running other expensive equipment. Through his binoculars, he observed that Linda had installed a hot tub, several outdoor heaters for her patio, and what appeared to be a cryptocurrency mining operation in her garage. She was essentially running a small electrical operation entirely powered by stolen electricity from her neighbors. The financial calculations were staggering. Between both households, Linda had likely stolen over $2,000 worth of electricity over the past 6 months. She was saving hundreds of dollars per month by avoiding legitimate electricity costs while her neighbors struggled with unexplained bill increases. Mike spent hours researching Linda's background and discovered troubling information about her financial history. Public records showed she had filed for bankruptcy 2 years earlier, before her divorce. She had also been sued by several creditors for unpaid debts. Her expensive lifestyle and luxury purchases were apparently financed through various forms of theft and financial manipulation. Sarah became increasingly concerned about the situation's complexity. "This isn't just about our electricity bill anymore," she told Mike. "Linda is running some kind of criminal operation. We need to involve the police." Mike agreed, but he wanted to ensure they had overwhelming evidence before making any accusations. He decided to install a hidden camera system to document Linda's theft in real time. Using his technical skills, Mike set up a small, weatherproof camera in his backyard that could record Linda's evening charging routine and provide video evidence of the ongoing theft. The camera footage revealed even more disturbing details about Linda's operation. She wasn't just casually plugging in her Tesla each evening. She was monitoring her electricity theft carefully, adjusting charging times and power levels to avoid detection. Linda clearly understood electrical systems well enough to manage her theft operation efficiently. Mike also discovered that Linda had been researching her neighbors' schedules and habits. The camera caught her walking along both fence lines during daylight hours, apparently checking her illegal connections and ensuring they remained hidden. She had been actively maintaining and concealing her theft operation for months. The psychological impact of the discovery was significant for both Mike and Sarah. They realized they had been living next to someone who was systematically deceiving and stealing from them every single day. Linda's friendly waves, her pleasant small talk, and her community involvement had all been a facade to cover her criminal activities. Mike began having trouble sleeping, knowing that every night Linda was stealing from his family while pretending to be a good neighbor. The violation felt personal and deeply disturbing. Sarah worried about what other criminal activities Linda might be involved in and whether their family was safe, living next to someone capable of such elaborate deception. The evidence Mike had gathered was now overwhelming. He had photographs, video footage, electrical measurements, and financial calculations proving Linda's theft beyond any reasonable doubt. The documentation showed a clear pattern of systematic electricity theft from multiple properties over several months. Mike also researched the legal penalties for electricity theft in their state. He discovered that stealing electricity worth more than $500 was classified as a felony, carrying potential jail time and significant fines. Linda's theft easily exceeded that threshold, meaning she was facing serious criminal charges once the evidence was presented to law enforcement. Sarah suggested they consult with a lawyer before approaching Linda or the police. The situation had become complex enough that they needed professional legal advice about the best way to proceed. They also wanted to understand their rights as victims and what kind of restitution they might be entitled to recover. Mike agreed, but he was also developing another idea. As an electrical engineer, he began thinking about ways to catch Linda in the act more definitively, or even set up a situation that would expose her theft publicly. The idea of simply reporting the theft to police felt somehow insufficient given the elaborate nature of Linda's criminal operation. That's when Mike began planning what would become known in their neighborhood as the trap. Mike's plan to catch Linda red-handed began forming during his sleepless nights staring at the ceiling. As an electrical engineer, He possessed the technical knowledge to create a sophisticated trap that would not only document Linda's theft, but also potentially disable her illegal operation in a dramatic and undeniable way. The idea excited him in a way that surprised even Sarah. The plan centered around installing a specialized electrical monitoring and control system on the outdoor outlets that Linda had compromised. Mike could install smart switches that would allow him to remotely monitor power usage and, when the time was right, cut power to Linda's theft operation while recording her reaction. The system would provide definitive proof of her crime while giving Mike control over the situation. Mike spent his lunch breaks visiting electrical supply stores, carefully purchasing the components he needed for his trap. He bought smart electrical outlets with remote monitoring capabilities, hidden cameras with night vision, motion sensors, and a sophisticated data logging system that would record every detail of Linda's electricity usage. The equipment was expensive, but Mike calculated that Linda had already stolen enough electricity to justify the cost. Sarah initially worried about the legal implications of Mike's plan. "What if we get in trouble for tampering with our own electrical system?" she asked. "What if Linda gets hurt somehow?" Mike assured her that everything he planned to install was legal and safe. He would be modifying his own electrical outlets on his own property, and the smart switches he planned to use had built-in safety features that would prevent any dangerous electrical situations. The trap would be sophisticated but completely within his rights as a homeowner. Over the weekend, Mike began installing his electrical trap system. He worked carefully, replacing the compromised outdoor outlets with smart outlets that could be controlled remotely through his smartphone. The new outlets looked identical to the original ones, so Linda wouldn't suspect anything had changed. Each smart outlet would log detailed power usage data and could be turned on or off remotely. Mike also installed several hidden cameras with motion detection around the areas where Linda's extension cords crossed onto his property. The cameras were weatherproof and virtually invisible, positioned to capture Linda's theft operation from multiple angles. The motion sensors would alert Mike's phone whenever anyone approached the compromised areas. The most sophisticated part of Mike's trap was a real-time monitoring system he set up in his home office. Multiple computer screens displayed live data from the smart outlets, camera feeds, and power consumption graphs. Mike could watch Linda's theft happening in real time and record every detail for evidence. The system was like something from a spy movie, but it was all commercially available technology applied cleverly. Mike tested his trap system extensively before Linda's next charging session. He verified that the cameras worked properly, the smart outlets responded to remote commands, and the data logging system recorded accurate power usage information. Everything functioned perfectly, and Mike felt confident that his trap would catch Linda definitively. On Tuesday evening, Mike positioned himself at his monitoring station and waited for Linda to arrive home. Sarah sat beside him, both of them watching the camera feeds and power consumption displays like they were watching a thriller movie. At exactly 7:45 p.m., Linda's red Tesla pulled into her driveway. Mike's heart raced as he watched Linda get out of her car and walk toward her charging station. The motion sensors immediately detected her movement and began recording. On his power consumption display, Mike could see the electrical load beginning to increase as Linda's Tesla started drawing power from his stolen electricity connection. "There she is," Sarah whispered, pointing at the camera feed showing Linda plugging in her Tesla. "She has no idea we're watching everything." Mike let Linda's theft operation run normally for about 30 minutes, allowing his system to log detailed power usage data and capture clear video footage of the crime in progress. Linda had no idea that every aspect of her theft was being monitored and recorded with professional-grade equipment. Around 8:30 p.m., Mike decided it was time to test his remote control capabilities. Using his smartphone app, he temporarily turned off power to the outlet Linda was using. On the camera feed, they watched Linda's Tesla charging indicator light go out immediately. Linda appeared at her charging station within minutes, clearly confused about why her Tesla had stopped charging. Mike turned the power back on after about 5 minutes. Linda's Tesla resumed charging, and she returned to her house, apparently assuming the interruption was just a temporary electrical issue. Mike smiled, knowing he now had complete control over Linda's theft operation and could disable it whenever he chose. Over the next week, Mike used his trap system to gather comprehensive evidence of Linda's criminal operation. His data log showed exactly how much electricity Linda stole each night, down to the kilowatt hour. The cameras captured Linda's daily routine of theft, including footage of her checking and maintaining her illegal electrical connections. Mike also discovered that Linda had been stealing electricity during daytime hours as well. His monitoring system revealed that Linda was running her cryptocurrency mining operation and hot tub during peak electricity rate hours, maximizing the financial value of her theft. She was saving hundreds of dollars per month while her neighbors paid inflated electricity bills. The psychological satisfaction Mike felt from having control over Linda's theft operation was intense. He could watch her criminal activities in real time and had the power to disrupt them at any moment. It was like having a secret advantage over someone who had been taking advantage of his family for months. Sarah suggested they had enough evidence to confront Linda or involve the police, but Mike wanted to create a more dramatic conclusion to Linda's theft operation. He began planning a scenario that would expose Linda's crimes publicly and ensure she could never deny or minimize her actions. Mike's plan involved timing the exposure of Linda's theft to coincide with the monthly HOA meeting, when most of their neighbors would be gathered in one place. He could present his evidence publicly, demonstrating Linda's crimes to the entire community, and ensuring that everyone understood the scope of her theft operation. The idea of publicly exposing Linda's criminal activities at the HOA meeting excited Mike more than it probably should have. He imagined the shock on neighbors' faces when they learned that the friendly woman they had welcomed into their community was actually a sophisticated thief who had been stealing from multiple households for months. Mike began preparing a presentation that would include his power usage data, camera footage, photographs, and financial calculations. The presentation would be comprehensive and undeniable, showing exactly how Linda had been stealing electricity and how much money her theft had cost her victims. As Mike prepared for his dramatic exposure of Linda's crimes, he had no idea that Linda was also preparing something that would change everything. Mike's plan for a dramatic public exposure at the HOA meeting was derailed when he discovered Linda was preparing to move out of the neighborhood. While monitoring his trap system on Thursday morning, Mike noticed unusual activity around Linda's property. A large moving truck had arrived and several workers were loading furniture and boxes. Panic set in as Mike realized Linda might be trying to escape before her crimes were discovered. If she moved away, pursuing legal action would become much more complicated and she might never face consequences for her extensive theft operation. Mike immediately called Sarah at work to inform her about the unexpected development. "We can't let her just disappear," Sarah said over the phone. "She's stolen thousands of dollars from us and Tom. We need to act now." Mike agreed, but he faced a difficult decision about how to proceed. He could confront Linda immediately while she was still in the neighborhood, or he could call the police and hope they could intervene before Linda completed her move. Either option carried risks and potential complications. Mike decided to approach Tom Williams first and inform him about Linda's theft operation. Tom deserved to know that his high electricity bills were the result of criminal activity, and Mike needed an ally when confronting Linda. The evidence Mike had gathered would be more convincing coming from two victimized neighbors, rather than just one. Tom's reaction to Mike's evidence was exactly what Mike had expected: shock, anger, and disbelief that a trusted neighbor had been systematically stealing from his family for months. Tom examined the photographs, video footage, and power consumption data with growing outrage. "This explains everything," Tom said, studying the financial calculations. "Janet and I have been arguing about our electricity bills for months. We thought our heat pump was broken or our teenagers were leaving lights on constantly." Mike and Tom agreed to confront Linda together before she could finish moving. They wanted to demand immediate restitution for the stolen electricity and ensure she understood the serious legal consequences of her actions. If Linda refused to cooperate, they would immediately involve law enforcement. Armed with Mike's comprehensive evidence file, the two neighbors walked to Linda's house around noon on Thursday. The moving truck was still there, but most of the loading appeared to be finished. Linda was standing in her driveway, apparently supervising the final stages of her move. Linda's reaction to seeing Mike and Tom approaching with serious expressions was telling. Her friendly facade immediately disappeared, replaced by a defensive and slightly panicked demeanor. She clearly suspected that her crimes had been discovered even before either neighbor said anything. "Linda, we need to talk," Mike said firmly, holding up his folder of evidence. "We know about the electricity theft." Linda's face went pale, but she attempted to maintain her innocence. "I don't know what you're talking about." "What electricity theft?" Tom stepped forward, clearly angry. "The electricity you've been stealing from both of our houses for months to charge your Tesla and run your equipment. We have proof." Mike opened his evidence folder and began showing Linda the photographs of her illegal electrical connections, the hidden extension cords, and the power consumption data. Linda's attempts to deny the theft became increasingly weak as Mike presented overwhelming evidence of her criminal operation. "This is all circumstantial," Linda said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You can't prove anything." Mike pulled out his smartphone and showed Linda the real-time video feed from his hidden cameras. "I've been recording your theft operation for weeks. I have footage of you plugging in your Tesla every night, checking your illegal connections and maintaining your theft equipment. The police will find this evidence very convincing." Linda's composure finally cracked when she realized the extent of Mike's documentation. She had been caught completely with evidence so comprehensive that denial was impossible. Her criminal operation had been exposed by someone with the technical skills and patience to build an unbeatable case against her. "How much do you want?" Linda asked quietly, finally acknowledging her guilt. "I can pay you back." Mike and Tom exchanged glances. They had discussed this possibility and agreed on their demands. Tom spoke first. "You've stolen over $1,000 worth of electricity from my family. I want full restitution plus compensation for the time and stress this has caused." Mike nodded. "Same for us. You've stolen at least $800 from our household, and that doesn't include the cost of the equipment I had to buy to catch you. We want complete reimbursement." Linda began calculating in her head, clearly overwhelmed by the financial implications of her crimes. The total amount she owed both families was substantial, especially considering her already precarious financial situation. "I don't have that kind of cash available right now," Linda admitted. "I'm barely able to afford this move." Mike wasn't sympathetic. "That's not our problem. You chose to steal from your neighbors instead of paying your legitimate electricity costs. Now you need to face the consequences." Tom suggested Linda could sell her Tesla to raise the restitution money. "You can't afford to charge a luxury car legally, so you shouldn't own one," he said bluntly. Linda's reaction to the Tesla suggestion was particularly revealing. She became emotional and defensive, making it clear that her expensive car was more important to her than making things right with her victims. Her priorities showed exactly the kind of person Mike and Tom were dealing with. Mike realized that Linda was unlikely to pay voluntary restitution, especially in the amount she actually owed. Her financial situation was too unstable, and her attitude toward the theft showed no genuine remorse or responsibility. It was time to involve law enforcement and let the criminal justice system handle Linda's crimes. "You have 24 hours to provide full restitution," Mike told Linda firmly. "If you don't, we're filing criminal charges for felony electricity theft." Linda asked for more time, claiming she needed to arrange financing or sell assets to raise the money. Mike and Tom refused, knowing that Linda was likely just trying to complete her move and escape accountability. As Linda's moving truck pulled away from her house that afternoon, Mike activated his trap one final time. He had been saving the most dramatic demonstration for last, and even though Linda was moving away, he wanted to send a clear message about the consequences of stealing from neighbors. Mike's final activation of his electrical trap system would ensure that Linda's story became legendary in their HOA community. Mike's final trap activation came at the perfect moment. Linda had returned that evening to collect her Tesla and a few remaining personal items, apparently planning to drive away from the neighborhood forever without providing any restitution to her victims. Mike watched through his camera system as Linda connected her Tesla one last time to his stolen electricity, probably assuming she could get away with one final theft. This time Mike had prepared a special surprise. Instead of simply cutting power to Linda's charging station, he had programmed his smart outlet system to cycle the power on and off every few seconds. The result was that Linda's Tesla would start charging, then stop, then start again, creating a strobe-like effect with the charging indicator lights. Mike also activated a loud electrical alarm he had connected to his monitoring system. The alarm was designed to sound like an electrical emergency, suggesting that Linda's theft operation was causing dangerous power fluctuations that threatened the neighborhood's electrical grid. The sound was loud enough to attract attention from other neighbors. Linda's reaction was immediate and panicked. She ran to her charging station trying to understand why her Tesla was behaving erratically and why alarm sounds were coming from the direction of Mike's property. The cycling power and alarm created exactly the dramatic scene Mike had envisioned. Within minutes, several neighbors had come outside to investigate the electrical alarm and the strange lighting effects coming from Linda's driveway. Mike stepped outside with his evidence folder, ready to explain to the gathered crowd exactly what had been happening in their community for months. Linda has been stealing electricity from multiple households to charge her Tesla, Mike announced to the assembled neighbors. The alarm you're hearing is connected to the monitoring system I installed to catch her in the act. Mike began showing the neighbors his photographs, video footage, and power consumption data while Linda stood mortified beside her malfunctioning Tesla. The crowd grew as more people emerged from their houses, drawn by the commotion and Mike's shocking revelations about their trusted neighbor. Tom Williams stepped forward to confirm Mike's accusations. "She's been stealing from my family too," Tom told the crowd. "Our electricity bills have been nearly double, normal because Linda was running her Tesla charging and other equipment off our power." The neighbors' reactions ranged from shock to anger to amazement at the sophistication of Linda's theft operation. Several people mentioned their own unexplained increases in electricity costs, wondering if they had also been victimized by Linda's criminal activities. Linda attempted to defend herself to the crowd, claiming the theft was a misunderstanding or a temporary emergency measure. Her explanations became increasingly desperate as Mike continued presenting irrefutable evidence of systematic, premeditated electricity theft over many months. "This wasn't an emergency," Mike told the crowd firmly. "Linda installed a sophisticated system to steal electricity from multiple neighbors. She painted extension cords to hide them, cut holes in fences, and even researched our daily schedules to avoid detection. This was organized crime." The crowd's mood turned decisively against Linda as they realized the extent of her deception. These were people who had welcomed her into their community, invited her to social events, and trusted her as a neighbor. Learning that she had been systematically stealing from them while maintaining a friendly facade was deeply disturbing. Linda's Tesla finally stopped its erratic charging behavior when Mike turned off power to his compromised outlet completely. The sudden silence made Linda's isolation in the crowd even more apparent. She was surrounded by neighbors who now viewed her as a criminal, who had violated their trust and stolen from their families. HOA President Margaret Foster arrived just as Mike was explaining the financial impact of Linda's theft. Margaret listened to the evidence with growing concern, realizing that Linda's crimes had created a serious problem for the entire community. The HOA would need to address the situation formally and ensure that similar theft couldn't happen again. "This is completely unacceptable," Margaret announced to the crowd. "Linda, you'll be receiving formal notice that your HOA membership is terminated immediately. We'll also be reporting this matter to law enforcement and supporting our neighbors in pursuing criminal charges." Linda made one final attempt to negotiate with the crowd, offering to pay partial restitution if they would agree not to involve police. Her offer was too little, too late, and several neighbors vocally rejected any compromise that would let Linda escape full accountability for her crimes. Mike refused Linda's partial restitution offer completely. "You had the chance to make this right when Tom and I confronted you earlier. You chose to try to run away instead. Now you'll face the full legal consequences of your actions." The crowd began dispersing as Linda realized her situation was hopeless. She had been caught red-handed, exposed publicly, and abandoned by her community. Her dreams of escaping accountability had been shattered by Mike's sophisticated trap system and his determination to seek justice. Linda disconnected her Tesla from the charging station for the final time and loaded it onto a car trailer she had rented. Her expensive car, which had been the centerpiece of her theft operation, would now have to be charged legitimately wherever she moved next. The days of free electricity stolen from hardworking neighbors were permanently over. Mike and Tom filed formal criminal complaints with the local police department the next morning. Armed with Mike's comprehensive evidence file, the police immediately opened a felony theft investigation. The evidence was so overwhelming that the prosecutor's office indicated they would likely pursue maximum penalties against Linda. The police investigation revealed that Linda's electricity theft operation was even more extensive than Mike had discovered. Detectives found evidence that Linda had been stealing utilities at her previous residence as well, suggesting a pattern of criminal behavior that extended beyond just their neighborhood. Linda was eventually arrested at her new apartment 2 weeks later. The felony charges included multiple counts of theft, criminal trespass, and utility fraud. The total value of her theft exceeded $5,000 when all victims were identified, making her eligible for significant jail time under state law. Mike's electrical trap system became legendary in the HOA community. His technical expertise and persistence had exposed a sophisticated criminal operation and protected other families from becoming victims. Several neighbors asked Mike to help them install similar monitoring systems to protect their own properties. The restitution process took several months, but Linda was eventually ordered by the court to pay full compensation to all her victims. She was also sentenced to 18 months in county jail and 3 years of probation. Her Tesla was seized and sold to help pay the restitution amounts she owed. Tom and Sarah both received complete reimbursement for their stolen electricity, plus additional compensation for their time and expenses related to the case. Mike's sophisticated evidence gathering had made the criminal case so strong that Linda's attorney advised her to accept a plea bargain rather than risk a trial. The neighborhood implemented new security measures to prevent similar theft in the future. The HOA updated their rules to require disclosure of any electrical modifications or high-consumption devices. They also established a neighborhood watch program to monitor for suspicious electrical activities. Mike kept his trap system operational even after Linda's conviction, partly as a security measure, and partly because he enjoyed the technical challenge of monitoring his property electronically. The system never caught another electricity thief, but it provided peace of mind and became a conversation piece when neighbors visited. Linda's theft had cost her far more than the electricity she stole. She lost her home, her community standing, her freedom, and her expensive lifestyle. The Tesla that had motivated her criminal operation was gone, sold to pay restitution to the neighbors she had victimized. For Mike and his family, the experience demonstrated the importance of investigating suspicious situations thoroughly and standing up to criminal behavior. Mike's engineering skills and determination had not only solved their own problem, but protected their entire community from a sophisticated predator. The story of Linda's electricity theft and Mike's ingenious trap became a cautionary tale shared throughout their city's HOA network. It reminded everyone that criminal activity could hide behind friendly facades and that vigilant neighbors with technical skills could be powerful allies in fighting crime. Mike often reflected on how a simple investigation into high electricity bills had uncovered such an elaborate criminal operation. If he hadn't possessed the engineering knowledge to detect and document Linda's theft, she might have continued stealing from multiple families indefinitely. The case proved that sometimes the most effective law enforcement comes from educated and determined citizens who refuse to be victimized.